Hello, everyone. Welcome to Football-Oranje, your home of Dutch football. If you are new here, do make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and head over to our website, footbaloranje.co.uk. We love our Dutch football. We do it all in English language. I hope you enjoy this podcast. Well, we're going to be talking about Ajax against Brighton. Of course, Ajax lost 2-0 at Brighton in the previous fixture in the Europa League. But can Ajax, with 2 wins from 2, maybe just turning a corner with their new manager, John Van Schip, take on Brighton with a renewed energy? They have lots of quality. Can they do it? We're going to talk about that in this show today. Of course, get a lowdown on Brighton. And who better to get than Johnny here? Johnny works for BBC Radio. Johnny, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Johnny Cantor. I work for BBC Radio, but I also do stuff for the BBC Sport website and for BBC Television. And I've covered Brighton and Hove Albion for the last 15 years. So I've seen their rise from League One all the way through to the Premier League and now the Europa League to take on titans of Europe like Ajax.
It's great to have you on. Someone's been watching Brighton so closely, and it must be so great as a fan to have enjoyed that and watch Brighton go on to new heights. What a competition this is as well, and what a group we ended up with. We're at the halfway point now. Marseille and AEK Athens make it the other 2 teams in the group. For, I guess, Dutch football fans, we have an eye on the coefficient as well, doing really well. We might have Ajax fans, of course, listening to this. Brighton fans might be tuning in as well, I'm sure, to hear your view, Johnny. But with this game now, Ajax have a really funny look on it, because what is more important? The Eredivisie and climbing that league, getting some pride back. How important is this game? I think it's so tricky to tell. I know that the Ajax players will be trying their all on Thursday, but do they expect a result? That's so difficult, even for me. I've been watching Ajax a lot this season. Now that they're turning a corner, I do think this will be much more of a game than the one in Brighton. It just looked like Brighton had loads of the ball. Ajax just tried to sit back, kind of hoping to keep the score down. And it kind of been what you expect to see from an Ajax team.
No, certainly not, because of their history and, of course, their more recent history doing so well in European competitions in the Champions League. I guess the timing of it was crucial, really, wasn't it? Because they had, the manager had been sacked, then they had a caretaker. But obviously, by the time the game was played, we kind of knew that there was probably going to be an interim manager, because Van Schip was hotly tipped to be announced on the Monday. But the game was on the Thursday, so we kind of had that inkling. So it must have been very difficult for the Ajax players, I think, and they looked devoid of confidence and belief. And I think just seeing the likes of Chuba Akpom, who obviously used to play for Brighton and Hove Albion, looks like a different person within a week. I know it was only cameos, but he did get his 2 goals, didn't he? But I think it just goes to show that how important the timing of that game, was to the detriment of Ajax and probably to the benefit of Brighton and Hove Albion, who actually hadn't been going through a great period themselves, but they came up against a team that clearly, was sort of waiting for the change, and they knew it was coming. So it's very difficult, I think, to commit to whatever the caretaker wanted to do with their style of play. And I think they just, as soon as they got the first goal, I think it was just inevitable. I was a bit disappointed Brighton didn't go on and sort of really try and capitalize, maybe improve the goal difference. I know it goes head to head first in the Europa League, but I think the goal difference could end up being crucial, could have been important. So it would have been nice to see them rack up that as well. But they decided that the job was there, just get their first ever win in the Europa League, and that's exactly what they did.
And Brighton, there's a lot been made of how they've been playing, some of their best players. We don't go too much into those obvious things. But Johnny, just looking at now the reverse fixture, going to Amsterdam, how important is this game for Brighton in the context of the group? Must they win?
I asked exactly that question last time to Roberto De Zerbi. I probably should ask it him again when I'm in Amsterdam on Wednesday. He is very ambitious, and he doesn't talk about qualification. He talks about topping the group. And I think that just goes to show that where he expects this team to be. I think it is tough. I think with no European credentials so far, adjusting to it is very difficult. I think, even Ike, I thought, showed that they had that European nous about them, Marseille as well. But the one thing you would say about Brighton and Hove Albion, they're very resilient. They're very young. He's constantly making changes. 5 again at the weekend against Everton. I imagine there'll be similar numbers, maybe even more come Thursday as well. But I think they're starting to learn how to play this. And I think they've kind of twigged it's not a cup competition. you're playing the group stages at the moment, and that's the most important thing. So whether it's a draw at Marseille, coming back to get that 2-2, where it's a first win, you've just got to be right in it against in that final game against Marseille at the Amex Stadium. So I think they're sort of trying to manage their way through the group, but De Zerbi certainly feels that this is a high priority. Yes, they qualify for Europe again via the Premier League, obviously, but there's no doubt about it. This is an important game, and I think they'll be thinking, even though there's been an upturn from Ajax, this is a big opportunity for them to pick up 3 points. To do that away from home, some might say unlikely, but it is a good opportunity.
And it shows the strength of Brighton, that how far they have come as a Premier League team, that they're up in that top half, probably that top 8, top 7, doing really, really well for themselves. Great team to watch. And I think if you put Feyenoord against Brighton at the moment, if there's any Ajax fans, sorry to mention Feyenoord on this podcast, if you put PSV maybe against Brighton, I think Feyenoord give Brighton a really, really good game. I think Feyenoord probably come out on top if it were in the Netherlands. Ajax, really not sure. This is a really tricky game to call. I think if you're a better man, you probably would go for goals, because Ajax are going to have to go for it. Brighton should be able to pick Ajax off on the counter-attack. Ajax cannot sit back. I mean, away at Brighton, it felt like damage limitations with the difficulties the team were going through. I think now they have these wins under their belt. The confidence is back. They will want to take this on, try and win the game. And if you land on a draw, I think Ajax take that at the moment. Just something to keep the run going, keep themselves ticking over. I don't think a narrow loss is going to be too damaging either to what their season is looking like at the moment. Ultimately, if Ajax can get out of this group and finish third or second, they're going to take that, having started so terribly. So them looking at this is kind of almost like a free hit, I guess.
Maybe, but they were unbeaten in their first 2 games in the Europa League, weren't they? They picked up 2 draws, so they were still in contention. I think the group is wide open as far as I can see. I do think there's going to be goals. I mean, in the Premier League, Brighton have scored in each of their last 19 away games. So they go for it no matter what. And even on the weekend when they played against Everton, they just seem to sort of not grind teams down, but they just keep playing this certain way. And Everton tired, and they were doubling up on Mitoma. Finally, Young didn't. There was just one. It was Harrison. He took on Harrison, got the deflected goal. But throughout the game, they'd had to double up. But eventually, it seemed that they were just losing a little bit of energy and impetus and intensity. And that's when Brighton managed to, come back. And I think that's been the story of their recent form, really, because a lot of people have said, no win in 5. In the Premier League, 1 win in 8 now, in all comps. That people are starting to question their form, but actually within that, they played Liverpool, they played Manchester City, they've played Aston Villa, and Everton, who are going really, really well. They've won 4 out of their last 6 in the Premier League coming into the weekend. So I think it's difficult to know whether the glass is half full or half empty, really, in terms of Brighton at the moment. And I have to mention the injuries because they are struggling a little bit. A lot of people haven't really talked much about Pervis Estupiñán because he's a left back, but he's the only naturally left-sided player that they had apart from Solly March, who's also injured. So Estupiñán may be in the running. I don't think they'll risk him on Thursday. Tariq Lamptey could come in. He was on the bench, but then got injured in the warm-up. Danny Welbeck is still missing. Julio Enciso is still missing. So there's quite a lot of players there that probably would be in the starting 11 for a big game that aren't available. And I think that's taken its toll as well. So you're playing quite a few games extra because you've got the Europa League, but also you've got a bit of an injury list as well. So that's probably had an impact. The quality of the opposition's probably had an impact, but they're still scoring goals. So based on this group, I think, I'm probably giving it the kiss of death and it'll be a 0-0 now. But I certainly expect it to be a high-scoring game. But I think it'll definitely be in the balance. And I think Ajax will have that home crowd behind them. They'll be buoyed by 2 wins. So should be a good atmosphere. It's how Brighton cope with that. They looked a little bit like rabbit in the headlights when they first played in the first half against Marseille. Well, actually, they started the first 5-10 minutes okay. But then they I think they looked a little bit stunned. But they seem to have grown from that experience, and now hopefully they can take that second half performance against Marseille into the Ajax game.
I have to say that Brighton's, I think it's a little shout out as well. Brighton's 3 Dutch players. We have an interview with them on this YouTube channel. I do recommend, if you're a Brighton fan, you should go and watch it, go and enjoy it. But those 3 players coming to play in Amsterdam, that's got to have an impact, hasn't it? Joel Veltman used to play for Ajax. Jan-Paul van Hecker, he knows what it's like to play in Amsterdam. And Bart Verbrugge, who never played in the Netherlands, but the guy knows Dutch football. Those three together, could they start together? And could you just give a quick note to anyone that's a fan of Dutch football watching, how have their seasons been so far?
Well, if I start with Joel Veltman, because he was at Ajax for nearly 20 years. He's loved by the fans. He's very dependable. He shows he's got real experience. He knows when to draw a foul. He knows when to play it safe. He knows when to try and push on. He's just got great game management. And I think that's been invaluable, not just this season, but in his whole career at the Albion. In terms of the money, obviously it was so low. A lot of people tout him as one of the best value players in the Premier League in the last 10 years, alongside maybe Pascal Gross, if you're talking about two Albion players, because he didn't cost that much. He's been very, very dependable. I sort of expect him probably to play right back, but he did sort of play at the weekend. So we'll have to wait and see. Milner could switch in there. In terms of Van Hecker, had a great game against Everton. Maybe a little bit lucky. There was a clumsy challenge on the edge of the box, which could have been either a free kick or a penalty. But he's really grown, I think. He's grown in his experience. I think a lot of people felt he was a championship player, but I think he's proving himself in the Premier League now. He's learning the way that De Zerbi wants to play. I wouldn't say necessarily people always thought of him as the wonderful ball-playing centre-back, because, when he was at Blackburn, he wasn't necessarily playing that way, even though they do like to play football there. But I think he's really, really grown in stature. But the way that De Zerbi's doing it's in, it's out, so you're never quite sure whether he's going to play. And I think he probably would benefit from being in the side. That probably applies to everybody. And it also probably applies to Bart Verbrugge. I mean, last week we were all talking about Jason Steele because he signed a new long-term contract at the club. He'd played, I think, 5 out of the last 6 games. Everyone thought, right, he's the number one. They've been flip-flopping 2 games here, 2 games there between the 2 keepers. And as soon as that happens, he signs a new deal, he gets dropped, and in comes Bart Verbrugge. So, you can just never tell with this manager what he's going to do. So I don't know whether Bart will play on Thursday, but he's done really well. He made a couple of good smart saves. I think he feels that Steele's quality with the ball and his delivery is just a little bit better at the moment. But there's no doubt that they really trust in Bart and they feel that he's going to be, I think, he will be the number one in the future. How long it takes him to maybe grasp that is up for debate, I think. But they've all done really, really well. They're very popular. I know JP is particularly popular in the dressing room.
Funny, isn't he?
He's a bit of a character. He likes a joke. He can be quite sarcastic, I think. But I think they love that. I don't really know Bart very well, but he seems really confident, eloquent, as is Joel Veltman. And quite often with Joel, I would say he is one of those people that's presented, maybe to us in the media when it's been a difficult day and maybe they haven't got the result they want. He's one of those leaders. And I think, with Lewis Dunk, with Pascal Gross, he's got that sort of Adam Lallana, those sort of that experience, always gets a good perspective on it. And I know I did speak to him, ahead of the last Ajax game, and he was saying for him, really, the big game is the one in Ajax. That's the one for him. Obviously, they put him up for the media and everything for the home game, but I think this is going to be, a little bit special for him. I know, Ajax fans maybe aren't totally on board with everything that he did while he was at the club, but in terms of Brighton and Hove Albion, you won't have a bad word heard about him at all.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I have to admit, I was critical of Veltman. I really like parts of what he did, and he had some good patches within seasons where you're like, come on then, let's kick on. And then the move was really good for him because it allowed him to kick on in different ways, and Reserve is getting the best out of him. So yeah, absolutely fair play to Joel Veltman. Someone we criticised a little bit when he played for the Netherlands as well, because that's also a popular feature of what we do here. And I know that Veltman was someone who's often criticised. It's really good that he's kicked on. Fair play to him. It's a shame we can't see him back for the Netherlands at the moment because I actually think he deserves it.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because people like Pascal Gross has been called up by the Germany squad. Today, João Pedro's gone into the Brazil squad. Lewis Dunk's now got 3 caps for England. You kind of felt, maybe that boat has sailed, I think, really, in terms of Joel. But he's got European experience as well. Yeah. And I think that's why they went for James Milner too, because he's like Joel Veltman. I mean, Joel Veltman, I think, had 54, 55 appearances in Europe for Ajax. It's a lot of European experience and that can really benefit Brighton in this group. He wasn't panicking after the first couple of games. He said there's still a long way to go in this group, and he's absolutely right. We're only halfway through, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
I
And
think
this,
I think we're halfway through, aren't we? I think we are.
we
Yeah,
are, we
yeah,
are.
we are. Yes, we are.
Setting up for a tasty game. So
Yeah,
if I just want to talk through some of the Ajax players that are going to be in this game, they were unchanged in the last 2 games. I have a feeling that Van Skip's going to keep that winning team. I mean, even the Dutch people say the English phrase "never going to change a winning team." They sound incredibly Dutch when they say it. But the lineup, I just don't see why he would want to change it. That does mean the inexperience from I stays in goal, probably. It does, because of injuries to the other choices at goalkeeper, probably does mean that we see Sutalo play again at centre back, who has been error prone, but the last couple of games, Ajax have won. Joel Harto, who has the highest pass completion rate in the whole of the Eredivisie per 90 minutes, which is an absolutely amazing stat when you consider where Ajax are in the league. You're probably going to see again Arjani Mata, who is a teenager who's playing as a left back. He is a left winger by trade. It came out of nowhere for me as a Dutch football fan to see him play at left back. Wild. But Van Sip's thrown him in. I thought we'd see a bit of stability and caution, but no, he's played a winger at left back who's never played left back, and all of this. So that was fascinating to see. This works.
What about in the centre of midfield? I mean, I see Van den Boomen has come in.
He has.
Tahirovic has dropped out, and I just wonder whether that's because I mean I thought Tahirovic was quite a strong player for them in the first game in Brighton. So I was a little bit surprised by that. Kenneth Taylor has got energy as well. The wide players, I think, probably picked themselves. And you said it, didn't you? You wanted Linson to be starting because he's a young talent and exciting. I guess with Van den Boomen and Taylor, that gives the insurance policy, and Clinton can push on and maybe help Robbie and the 2 wide players. So he's got that mix. It's interesting what you say about the unchanged thing, because obviously Brighton have been changing, like changing them quicker than their underpants, like sometimes in terms of players, and they've had to do that. I think you would say the Premier League is more intense than the Eredivisie, so you have to do that, and they've got another game on Sunday against Sheffield United. I think those fullbacks will be interesting because obviously you've got, did you say Marta's on the left, haven't you? So you've got that up against Adingra probably, and then you've got Mitoma up against Skei.
Most likely.
They
sort of make a bit of a 3 though. I've noticed that Harter comes more of a left back, so that Marta can really push on to help Bergwijn in attack. But yeah, that's going to be, for me, a bit of a mismatch at fullback. I can really see those wingers having a good time. Or maybe Ajax continue their fine form and they surprise us all.
They could push back the Albion wingers and make them defend, or vice versa. So that would be a really interesting dynamic in the game, I really do think. And I think they've got attacking players that can score goals. Bergwijn, of course, Albion fans will remember him from the Premier League. You know, even Robbie seems to be more confident, maybe getting a little bit more support up front. And they will make changes. Whether Van Hecker sort of stays in the side, I probably don't think so. He did play with a black 3 previous to Everton, just for 1 game. He could do that, but I expect Igor to come back in left-sided centre back, probably Dunk switching over to the right, I think is the most likely option. But coming back to that left-sided thing again, Milner, he can't push on down the wings like Estupiñán because he's not naturally left-sided, so he always has to cut back and come back infield, and that's a bit of a frustration. That's if Estupiñán stays out. He's had a hamstring injury, and his boundless energy means that sometimes he can get beyond Mitoma, and it's another problem for the fullback, which allows Mitoma to do something else, maybe come inside. Whereas actually, if it's just Mitoma pushing on, you know, Everton did 2-on-1 pretty much the whole game, and they did nullify that threat to a large degree. So it's quite an interesting dilemma, I think, for the Ajax manager. Yeah. But again, I wouldn't want to sort of predict the side because you never know with Roberto De Zerbi. He'll probably change the midfield. Maybe Dahoud comes in. Maybe Gilmour drops out. Gross is ever present. Whether Lallana can play 2 games in 4 days, I think is unlikely. My gut feel is it'll be Pedro up front with Ansu Fati just behind. They brought on energy in the second half against Everton, but I think they'll be the starting front 2 with Fati just behind Pedro going into Thursday. That's my prediction anyway. Gross, well, he just never drops him. So I would say Gross, another in that midfield. Mitoma and Adingra, the 2 wide men, and Pedro with Ansu Fati just behind.
Fair enough. And you mentioned the Ajax midfield. I think it is going to be Van der Boomen and Taylor. Taylor, I'm critical of sometimes. He's neat and tidy, but sometimes he doesn't quite have that quality in the final third. That's what Hilinson's there for. I do think he's magic, and I do think he's going to really kick on the Icelandic midfielder. A little side note here: we actually requested to have an interview with him, and Ajax said yes because he's with the youth team. But now he's with the first team. We probably aren't going to get that interview anytime soon because he's going to be so busy. But he is a fine player. I do really like him. He's got his head screwed on. So definitely bear his name in mind in the future. With regards to the scoreline then, a prediction, time to be brave, time to throw our hat into the ring. What do we think? I'm going to go, I was feeling really pessimistic about this, but I'm going to go 2-2. That's a good result for Ajax at the moment. And I think Chuba Akpom's going to come off the bench and score a goal quite late on. Because he's done it so recently. A lot has been made in the media in the Netherlands about his changed character, how the manager came to see him and ask how he was as a person, because he'd not have that under Maurice Stein, which is a shame to hear, because Stein was a great man manager before in his career. But it's so stressful for all of them at Ajax that they had their own sort of side clique, and Akpom didn't really fit in, couldn't settle in a new country. So good to hear he's back on form, and he's got a smile on his face. I think he's going to score. Does he start or not? We'll see. But if he comes off the bench, I think he'll get a goal. How about you? I'm going to go 2-2.
Well, I mean, from what we experienced when he was at the Albion, I think it would be unlikely. He didn't actually score for the Albion. He had a bit of a trouble time, but he didn't really get much opportunities. It was very late on in games he was brought on, and I don't, to be truthful, the Seagulls fans didn't really take to him. I don't think. You can't speak for everybody. But I did watch those interviews at the weekend, and I thought they were really interesting. And it's just giving people that confidence. I think it's something that De Zerbi's done with a lot of his players. Maybe Van Schip is the right man to bring the best out of him. As you say, whether he'd start ahead of Robbie, I don't know. I think there'll be goals. I think it will be a very, very close game. But I'm just got that gut feel that Brighton are due a win. I think, they've been very close. They goal ruled out for VAR. Dunk pulled out a good save from Pickford, but he also hit the crossbar in the game before. They've come very close, and a couple of decisions haven't quite gone their way. So I think if they do get the first goal, I think they should be good for a win. But I'm going to go big, and I'm going to go 3-2 Brighton.
Part of me was thinking, 3 for Brighton because of the bad defending at the moment. 3-1, 4-1 maybe. But I was trying to be more optimistic.
But I mean, Brighton have scored and conceded in every single Premier League game this season.
That's incredible. Wow.
So, I mean, that hasn't happened since the 80s. I think Spurs were the last team to do it. So, I expect them to score goals, but I do expect them to, there's a very good chance they'll concede as well. That clean sheet against Ajax, the only clean sheet of the season so far.
And with the group as a whole, where do you see these 4 teams finishing in the end, if you're going to call it?
Wow, that is such... do you know
so
what?
Tight.
It is. And I think they're all slightly different. I think Athens looks solid. That's how I would describe them. I think they're going to be very difficult to beat. Now they're leading the group on 5 points. I think it'll be very difficult for Brighton to get a win over in Athens in a couple of weeks' time. Marseille have that really hot and cold feel. They're consistently inconsistent. Flashes of brilliance, but actually at times look a bit uninterested. They haven't really been scoring many goals in the Ligue 1, but I think on their day they seem to raise themselves sometimes for the big occasion. So Ajax, from what I saw, obviously I saw that game against Brighton, and I did see the highlights against Heerenveen. I think it's. I've got a funny feeling that Athens will top the group, actually, because I think if they can pick up some good results at home in their last couple of games, maybe. I think it's just going to be tight. I do think it will go down to the final week, and that may choose the dynamics, because one team might actually have to really go for it, and also with this head-to-head rule that the team that you play against, you finish above them or below them. So a lot of people will say to me, well, Brighton have got a better goal difference than Athens. Why was it Athens or Marseille? Why are we not above them? Well, because of the head-to-head, I think, because they lost against Athens at one stage. So that's how that could materialise, and it could even come down to who you played or even goal difference. I think it could be that tight, but we'll have to see. And then again, you've still got another sort of 6 weeks, haven't you? Eventually, is it maybe 5 weeks till the final game? So injuries, players coming back, that could have a big factor as well.
My gut feeling says that Ajax will have to beat Athens at home and to get ourselves a 3rd place. That's how I think it'll go. I don't think they'll pick up any wins really between now and that game. And I think if they can win that game, that season through in some sort of European football after Christmas.
Yeah,
That's
well,
tell you that right now.
I think the same would apply for Brighton. I think they will need a result on the final game day against Marseille to get themselves into the Europa League playoffs. The other Europa Conference League, well, that's another one. But whether people want it or not, I think it's great, no matter what. I mean, you want to be playing in European competition. Yes, it's another.
It's all like falling upwards, isn't it?
But I think for a lot of Premier League sides, they've seen the success that West Ham United had last season.
Exactly.
And I think that winning feeling, winning a cup, winning silverware is very, very special. And if we're honest, it's going to be very difficult for teams who regularly finish, say, mid-table in the Premier League or top 10 to actually do that. So it is an opportunity. But as I said before, De Zerbi's got ambitions of going deep into the Europa League, let alone Europa Conference League. So I think it's going to be an intriguing few weeks ahead, that's for sure.
Yeah, all exciting stuff. This is why we love European football. Johnny, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
Where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter at BBC at Johnny Cantor _. So that's where tweeting out from there. Instagram, Johnny Cantor Media, if you want to catch me there. And also we do the Albion Unlimited podcast, which is our own look at Brighton and Hove Albion. So on a weekly basis with featured guests, ex-players, looking ahead to games. And that will be available looking ahead to Ajax with some other guests as well. So look forward to that. Podcast that you, of course, have been on, Michael, as well. So a friend of the podcast too. So yeah, come join the party, as we say.
Thank you, Johnny. And of course, if you're new to Football-Oranje, give it a like if you enjoyed the show, and subscribe if you don't know what we do. Check us out some more. Like I said, there's an interview with 3 Brighton players we've got on our channel. Go and check it out if you're a Brighton fan. And more from us very soon in Football-Oranje, much more Dutch football content to come. Thanks everyone for watching.